Hey everyone, Mr. Macintosh here. In this video, I'm going to show you how to install macOS Ventura on your older unsupported Mac with OpenCore Legacy Patcher. This will allow you to install newer applications, take advantage of macOS Ventura's new features, and install the latest security updates to keep your Mac secure. This walkthrough will be an easy to follow step-by-step guide that anybody can follow. We got a lot to cover. Let's jump in and get started. I know you want to get started installing right away, but if you stick with me for just a little bit here, I want to go over some really important steps that'll save you so much time in the later parts of the installation so you don't run into any trouble. So the first part is there's always things changing with OpenCore Legacy Patcher and macOS updates. Check the updates section in this video below in the description. As you can see here in my video, I have all these updates here that you can look over and all kinds of different chapters to get to exactly the point in the video you need to go to. The next thing here is the official OpenCore Legacy Patcher documentation guide. The developers worked really hard to put all this documentation together and it's fantastic, fully detailed, and this is what I base the videos on to be able to take you through the walkthrough. The next most important piece is make sure we back up all the data on our system before we start the installation. And I recommend two sources, Time Machine and a separate drive with just copying over files like your entire user folder or anything in your downloads, documents, or desktop. And then you'll have two copies just in case one doesn't work. You have your data always backed up. The next thing is that this is an unsupported software installation that is not supported by Apple. And if you bring in your system to an Apple store or a third-party repair place, you have to let them know that you're using a patcher so they'll understand what's going on if you have troubles in the future. Now keep in mind, OpenCore Legacy Patcher has been installed on thousands upon thousands of systems with no issues whatsoever. But if you do, I just want to make this very clear. And also, arguably, the system is now more secure and useful than it ever was when it was on a previous installation of macOS that's not even kept up to date by Apple anymore. But again, use this at your own risk and you can view all the code in the open source project on the OpenCore Legacy Patcher page. Everything is there to be able to be viewed. The next thing is have a backup plan if things don't work out. So let's say something goes wrong in the installation of OpenCore Legacy Patcher, have the original OS USB installer so you can be able to go back to your previous operating system if something goes wrong. Now I'm going to show you a little trick in here to be able to do a dual USB installer so we can do that in one shot. That'll be later in the video. The next thing is when we're talking about two different ways to install OpenCore Legacy Patcher, we can perform an upgrade and a fresh install, meaning that a upgrade will upgrade, for example, macOS High Sierra directly to macOS Ventura, saving all your data and all of your applications. But a lot of times fresh install is fully recommended because you're starting totally fresh with no baggage of the other old stuff on the system. And you can pick either or, and I'll show you both of those when we get to that point. The next thing is there's an issue with the 2013 MacBook Pro. It gets stuck at the loading bar after an installation or macOS update, and I'll put a little link in the description so you can understand that problem a little bit later. The next thing is use the comment section if you need any help and I can give you a hand. And then also I put out multiple OpenCore Legacy Patcher update videos whenever a new version of OpenCore Legacy Patcher or macOS comes out. I put an update video to keep you up to date. The next thing I want to talk about is equipment needed. Obviously you need an unsupported Mac from 2008 to 2016. Then you're going to need a USB installer. I recommend 16 gigabytes or larger, and you can use a flash drive or external hard drive. The next thing is that if you have an older Mac, 2010 to 2008, you're going to need a USB 2.0 hub. Now this is different from macOS Big Sur, macOS Monterey. This is very critical to be able to have because if you don't have this, you're not going to be able to use a mouse or keyboard in the recovery system after a macOS update or when you're trying to install. If you have an old Apple keyboard from 2008 that is USB 2.0 and the USB plugs on the side act as a 2.0 hub. Also, when I recommend the hardware upgrades, I recommend having an SSD hard drive and at least 8 gigabytes of RAM. Now you can do with 4 gigabytes because I've done that before in the past, but if you're looking for the best performance, this is what I recommend. All right, now that we got all that out of the way, we can jump to our demonstration Mac here today, which is a 2014 11-inch MacBook Air, and we are running macOS High Sierra. So the first thing we're going to need to do is get a copy of OpenCore Legacy Patcher. When you go to Safari or your browser that you want to use, type in OpenCore Legacy Patcher, and once we're in here, we go to the GitHub. So now we go down to the Releases tab here to be able to click on this, and you can notice that some of the rendering on older versions of Safari don't work very well, and this could could be a problem. So if you go down here to the assets section and it's trying to load, you're on an older browser that cannot load the GitHub assets section. So if you do, all you need to do is go use a newer browser, Firefox, and this is what the assets section will look like. And all you need to do is click on OpenCore Patcher GUI app.zip. Click that and it'll go right to your downloads folder. If you're still having problems loading this asset section, I will put a direct link to this OpenCore Legacy Patchers from the GitHub that you can click right in the description. We'll wait a second here for this to download and we'll continue on. Okay, we finished downloading and it just jumped up and down in the downloads folder, and you can see we've got our OpenCore Patcher GUI apps.zip. Now it should unzip in the downloads folder, but if it doesn't, you can either click on it right in here from the downloads, or you can go into Finder here or click on the Macintosh hard drive and go to your downloads folder, and then this is where it'll be. So double click on it if it hasn't unpacked already, and then you'll see the application right here in the downloads folder. Now the next thing we need to do is put that into our applications folder. So all we need to do is drag this right into our application folder like this, drop it in, and now it's in the applications folder. We can hit the O key here, and then that's our application. We'll double click on it. All we need to do is click on open. We know that we downloaded from github.com as a safe source. We'll click open. And here is the OpenCore Legacy Patcher application. The patcher has gone through some graphical interface changes and some back-end changes, and that's why we're doing a new video here, because of all the nice new changes with the patcher. And there's some things that are different from the previous video that I did last time. So now that we have this open, the next thing we're going to need to do is plug in our USB drive, whether it's our flash drive or external hard drive. So I'll do that now. And it should load to the desktop. Okay, there's our USB drive that just loaded on the desktop. If you don't see these icons here, go into Finder, click on Preferences, and you click on Hard Drives and External Drives, and that's how you can see these drives here on the desktop. Now we need to go into the Disk Utility app. So we'll go back into the hard drive, we'll go into Applications, scroll all the way down to the bottom, go into the Utilities folder, and then go into Disk Utility. Once Disk Utility is open, we'll see our internal hard drive here and then our external drive, which is our USB right here. Now what we need to do next is we need to click on View, or you can click on View up here at the top, and we need to select Show All Devices, because we need to be able to select the top level drive to be able to erase the drive. Now before we do that, make sure that if you have anything on this USB that you want to back up, like some extra files or something that you had on there, copy them off now, because we have to erase the entire drive to be able to do the next step. Let's click on Erase on the top level drive. And to know we're in the right spot, we need to see the 3 different sections here. We need to see Name, Format, and Scheme. If you don't see the scheme here, go back and select this, because you might have selected this. Now, once you see it in here, don't worry about the name. That can be anything, because it's going to be renamed later. It needs to be in the format of macOS Extended Journal, and the scheme needs to be GUID Partition Map. Once that's done, click on Erase. All done. Now if you get to the time machine, just click on Don't Use. Now click on Done, and our USB drive is ready to go to create the macOS installer for macOS Ventura in OpenCore Legacy Patcher. So now the next thing we need to do is click on the Create macOS Installer. Now what we're going to do is we're going to download the macOS installer. If you already have it downloaded already, you can click on Use Existing Installer and navigate right to this to save a lot of time. But to show you the walkthrough, we're going to download the macOS installer. Now it's going to look at the catalog to see all the versions of macOS available first, and it's going to show us macOS Big Sur, macOS Monterey, macOS Ventura, and soon macOS Sonoma. But since we're doing macOS Ventura, that's macOS 13, it's going to show us the latest version available, and today that's 13.5. But in the future there might be 13.6 or 13.61. Doesn't matter, it'll show you the latest version here. Click on this now, and it's going to immediately start downloading from Apple servers. It's going to show you the average download speed and the estimated time remaining. This can take anywhere from 15 minutes all the way to an hour. So we're going to let this sit here and download, and we're going to pick it right back up when we're getting close to being done. 3, 2, 1. There we go. Now it's going to run a validation on the full installer, and we'll come back as soon as this is finished. Okay, finished the verification. Now we need to type in our administrator password and hit enter. Now it's going to extract and put the full installer onto the USB. Okay, the installer is now extracted and is ready to create the macOS installer. Would you like to continue to create? Yes, we would. We'll click on yes. Now I found 2 installers. I have the macOS High Sierra that we're going to use a little bit later, so we have a backup just in case we need to install the original operating system. But we are installing Ventura, so we are going to select macOS Ventura. And then it's going to ask us to select the local disk. We have our USB plugged in, so we'll click on that. It's already highlighted. Now it's going to be that confirmation that we talked about, that it's going to erase the entire USB. So make sure all your files are backed up as a final warning, and we'll click on yes. And we'll type in our administrator password. Okay. And there we go. It unmounted the drive. And if we get the time machine, we'll click on don't use. And it's going to mount it again here. And now you can see the macOS Ventura. You can click don't use again. And now it's going to write the full installer to the USB. And again, depending on the speed of your drive, it could be very quick, under 10 minutes, or it could take over 30 minutes with a slower USB drive. So we'll let this finish and we'll come back up after the installer is created. Okay, the create install media part for macOS Ventura is complete. And if we open up our USB drive here, we see that we got the full installer in here. But that's not fully complete yet, because what we're going to do is install OpenCore to the USB drive so we can boot from it for the bootloader. So the next thing we want to do is click on yes. Now it's going to build all the patch pieces and put them in a temporary folder here. And then we're going to take all these files and then install them to our USB disk. We're going to click install to disk. We are going to click our SSD or our USB flash drive here. And then EFI. And then our administrator password. The EFI partition and the OpenCore are now installed on our USB, and that's complete. It's saying basically we are ready to reboot to apply, or if we're ready to install, hold down the option key, but we're not going to do that just yet. We're going to show you another tip. What we're going to do is we're going to click ignore because we can reboot later, but the installation of this piece is complete. What we're going to do next, we're going to split the USB in half and put our normal installer for whatever version we have that we're running right now. So let's say we're running High Sierra right now. We're going to put a High Sierra on the other side of this USB disk just in case we need to have a recovery or reinstall the official version of macOS. Now, if you don't want to do this, skip towards the next section in the chapter and we'll continue on with the normal install. But if you want to put High Sierra, so it's a dual boot install, one for factory and one for OpenCore Legacy Patcher, stick with me with the next part. Okay, in this section, we are going to put a version of supported macOS that our older hardware supports, for example, all the way up to High Sierra on our USB. So we're going to split it up. So we're going to open up Disk Utility in the Applications folder. Then we're going to go down to the Utilities folder and then open up Disk Utility. Inside here, what we're going to do next is we're going to make sure that we click View and then make sure Show All Devices is selected. We see our USB drive here, and if we click on it at the top level, we can click the partition button. And we can see the installer now takes up the full drive, whatever size it is. But what we're going to do is we're going to split it in half. And we're going to make this our High Sierra installer. So we're going to click on Apply here, and we're going to cut it in half. And make sure that the format is Extended Journal. Click on Partition. And now it's cut in half. And we'll click on Done and Don't Use for Time Machine. So we can close Disk Utility now. And you can see that the other volume is now mounted, and this is completely empty. And we're going to use this to create our macOS High Sierra or whatever, macOS Sierra, whatever older supported operating system that is the highest version for your older Mac. All we need to do now is get the installer for the version that you would like to download. High Sierra or any other version of macOS that you had for your current version, all you need to do is go to my site. I've got all these different links to the App Store and direct downloads, but they're all coming from the main Apple site. You can go here, and I'll include these links in the description. All you need to do is click on High Sierra, and it's going to bring you to the ability to download the installer. But we save time here, and I already downloaded the installer, and it's in our Macintosh hard drive, Applications folder, and Install High Sierra. There it is. So now all we need to do, we'll put this to the side and open up our Terminal app. So we'll go into our Applications, we'll go into Utilities, and we'll go into Terminal. and double click on it. The first thing we're going to do is run it as an administrator. So we're going to type in sudo and then space. And then we're going to go back to our full installer here, and then we're going to right click on it, or you can hold down the control key on your keyboard if you don't have right click activated. Hold down control and left click, and you'll see show package contents. So either way you do that is fine. So click on show package contents, go into contents, and then resources, and then you'll see create install media. That's the binary we're going to use. We're going to drag it right to the window, and that's the full command. Now what we need to do is do 2 dashes, 1, 2, and then volume, VOLUME, and then space, and then we are going to drag our untitled, or that second volume that we just created in disk utility over here, and then hit enter. We're going to type in our administrative password. You won't see it type into the field, but it is doing it. Hit enter or return. And we're going to click yes to erase that volume. And there it goes. It's going to erase that secondary volume, leave the other volume there, click don't use if you get this pop-up, and it's going to create the macOS High Sierra installer. So now if anything goes wrong and you have to go back, this is very rare that this happens, but you'll be prepared now. You'll be able to boot macOS High Sierra from the same USB installer. So we're going to wait till this finishes, and we'll pick up right after it's done. Okay, the macOS High Sierra installation is complete for our USB install for our native, just in case we need to go back. So we're ready to start the installation. Now, one thing I like to do before we continue is move a copy of the OpenCore Legacy Patcher application to our USB drive. Now, keep in mind, the auto installer is on there and it's going to install it automatically to our applications folder. But if it doesn't, if something goes wrong, it's always nice to have an extra copy so you don't have to go out there and download it if there's something wrong with the installation. So we've got a copy there just in case. And now we're ready to reboot to start the installation. So we'll close all of our windows here. And what we're going to do is when we click on Apple to restart, and then we're going to hold on the Option key on our keyboard. So we're going to hold on Option now, and then we're going to click on Restart. Okay, we are now at the boot picker selection screen after holding down the Option key, and we can now see all the options, including our USB drive to be able to boot. We see our EFI Boot for the OpenCore Legacy Patcher bootloader, our High Sierra installer for our backup in case something goes wrong, and our main install macOS Ventura that we're going to use. Now keep in mind, if you have a 2010 and older Mac, this is the time where you're going to have to plug in that USB 2.0 dongle so you can use the keyboard and the mouse in the recovery and in the installation part. Or you can use the old 2008 or older Mac keyboard that's USB 2.0 compliant. But if you're using a 2011 or newer, you can continue on with the built-in keyboard or external keyboard. So now what we need to do is we can either go with our mouse button over here or click the arrow button, and then we're going to click on the arrow button right here. It's going to bring us to the next screen. Now we're at the black screen with the OpenCore bootloader. We're going to tab over or hit the arrow button, and we're going to click on Install macOS Ventura. Now we're going to boot into the Install macOS Ventura installer with the OpenCore Legacy Patcher bootloader. Okay, we'll click on our language and then next or the arrow. All right, now we're in macOS recovery for Ventura via the OpenCore Legacy Patcher bootloader. This is where if you do not have mouse and keyboard access, you have a 2010 and lower, make sure you plug in that USB 2.0 hub or older keyboard now so you'll be able to have mouse and keyboard access. And make sure that before we continue, we're going to show 2 different ways to do the installation. First, I'll walk you through the first step. Number 1 we'll go through here is an upgrade install where all of your data, your files, your applications are retained. We're going to upgrade your current OS to Ventura. And then step number 2 is a full erase install of a fresh copy of macOS Ventura. So if you want to do that, skip to the next section. And if you want to do an upgrade install, we'll walk through that right now. So if we're going to do an upgrade install, all we need to do is click on Install macOS Ventura and then click Continue. And then Continue. Agree, and agree again. And now Macintosh hard drive is what we're looking for here for our main drive, and then click on continue, and that will do a full upgrade of your system to macOS Ventura. And then we'll catch you in the next section and we'll walk you through what to do once we get into the OS after the upgrade. Okay, in this option number 2 section, we're going to show you how to perform an erase and install. A lot of times this is recommended so you get the best performance of a fresh system on an erased drive. Make sure you back up all your data before you continue to this next section, because all of the data on your hard drive will be erased. So if we want to do an erase install, all we need to do is click on Disk Utility now, click Continue. We're going to see a full loadout of all the drives in our system, internal, external, and disk images. We're going to go up to the internal section here and click on Macintosh hard drive. If you named your drive like disk or HD or something like that, that's what it'll be named up here. But this is what the normal standard drive is called, Macintosh hard drive by default. We're going to go over here and click Erase. One final warning to back up all your data, because this will erase your entire drive. We'll click on Erase and leave the format as APFS, because that is a standard format for macOS Ventura. We'll click on Erase. Okay, the erase is complete. Let's click Done, and then we can click on Disk Utility and Quit. Now we can go back to Install macOS Ventura, and then we'll click on Continue. Continue. Agree again, and click on Macintosh hard drive, and then click on Continue. And there we go. The installation is going to be copied over to the internal hard drive, and then once that's done, the system's going to reboot. It's going to reboot multiple times during this process, but you do not need to select anything because all of the reboots are automatic. The startup disk for the OpenCore Legacy Patcher is selected, and then the Install macOS Ventura is selected automatically, so you don't have to hold on to any keyboards or do anything like that. When this whole process is done, we will be at the Setup Assistant, and I'll walk you through that setup, and then we will continue from there. Okay, we're back up after our install of macOS Ventura, and everything went smooth. We are now at the Setup Assistant window. You can walk through the Setup Assistant here and create your account, and as soon as we get to the desktop, we'll pick up and continue from there. We are back up after the Setup Assistant, but if you perform the in-place upgrade, you're going to be right at the login window, so you can log in. So we'll type in our password. Or if you already went through the Setup Assistant for an erase install, you'll already be at the desktop now with your new account. And now what should happen is two things here. You should see a transparent dock. That's your indication that the root patches were installed automatically by the OpenCore Legacy Auto Patcher, which is a great function because that's why the Setup Assistant was going so fast, because the acceleration was working. And that's really great. Now this is what we should see come up here. And what this is the automatic patcher has run and checked and found that the Mac is booting off of your USB drive. And we want it to be able to boot off of your internal hard drive. And then we can disconnect the USB drive. So all we need to do now is click OK, because it's going to automatically set up all of the bootloader patches and then put them to this temporary location again. But this time we're going to install it on the internal hard drive. So we'll click on Install the disk. And this time we're looking for disk 0. That's going to be our internal hard drive. The blue selection here means what it's booted up to. It's booted right now off of our USB. Now hold down Option key on your keyboard. Now what you'll see here is you'll see the boot EFI, and I apologize, the screen capture is not working very well right now. This will say boot EFI because you can see the OpenCore logo, and this is the internal hard drive, but we need to boot now from the bootloader. If you click the arrow keys, you can move back and forth, but then all you need to do is click with your mouse key here or hit enter when it's already on there, and then you can click on the macOS Ventura and it'll automatically now boot off of the bootloader and select macOS Ventura every time defaulted to be able to boot your Mac. Okay, we're back up. We'll log in. Now, a couple of troubleshooting things here. Now, let's say that you see a dark, non-transparent bar. The system's running slow. Maybe the automatic root patcher did not work properly. So what we can do is I'm going to show the Macintosh hard disk on our Finder here. So we can now go into Macintosh hard drive or click on Finder, and we're going to go open up OpenCore Legacy Patcher. We should see our shortcut, and we'll double click on this. We'll open it back up, and what we can do here is we can click Install Post Root Patch. What that'll tell us is if it actually worked and installed the root patches. So let's click on that, and it did install when we first did the installation of macOS Ventura. Now, if this was not showing here, it would say that, hey, we need to install the patches up here. but we are fully installed. But if that says that, all you need to do is click on root patching and it'll install those root patches, and you can reboot, and hopefully that works for you. Now, the other thing I wanted to go over is if you want the Mac to boot up like normal without showing the boot picker every time, we can do that by going into settings. Then we can uncheck show OpenCore boot picker, then click on return, and then build and install OpenCore, and then install to disk, and then internal hard drive, EFI, password, reboot, restart. And we'll take a look at what that looks like now. There we go. And again, sorry about the capture card not working here, but now we do not see the boot picker and the Mac automatically boots up just like a native Mac now. If for some reason you do not have sound working when you come back up, go into the system settings and then we'll scroll down to sound, and then make sure that when you look at the output here, you'll see output and input. Look how I have mine selected on the HDMI. Make sure internal speakers is selected. So for example, if I turn on play feedback when volume is changed, don't hear anything. See that? No sound. But if we select our internal speakers, now we should have sound. There's our sound. Now that could happen if you're plugging in a monitor, or it can happen just on a laptop. So make sure that internal speakers is selected for sound. Now the next thing I want to talk about is software updates for macOS and software updates for OpenCore Legacy Patcher. The best thing is that OpenCore Legacy Patcher can now update itself. And you might notice I mentioned earlier about the alias, and that's because the proper location of the OpenCore Legacy Patcher is now in application Dortania. That's where the actual application resides now, and that's where it's going to stay. But what happens is that an alias is put in the application folder, so you always know where it is to be able to get access to it. So you do not need to change this. When you open this up, it'll open up the regular location. And if there is an update to OpenCore Legacy Patcher, for example 0.69 or 7.0, whatever in the future, you'll see a pop-up here, and you'll be able to click update. It'll update the app, and then the alias will work to the previous location, and it'll work just like normal. Now, if you want to be able to install a software update, let's say 13.6, 13.7, whatever comes out, what I recommend is making sure that you're updated with the OpenCore Legacy Patcher 2. Make sure you got the latest version of OpenCore installed, and then make sure you have the latest version of post-install root patches. Then you know that there's nothing wrong with those latest version of OpenCore Legacy Patcher first. Then you can install the latest version of software update. Once the software update is installed, then OpenCore Legacy Patcher will tell you, hey, we need to now install the new post-root patches, because the software update will wipe those patches out, and then this will automatically put them back in. If that fails, just open up the app and then run this, and it'll tell you that it has to install patches. It'll say right up here, it says you need to install these patches, and then you'll be A-OK. I want to give a huge props and thanks to all of the people who are involved in OpenCore Legacy Patcher, especially the main co-author Mykola and DhinakG, and all of the developers that put in all of their time and effort into making this amazing software. I can't tell you how much we all appreciate all of your hard work on this wonderful patcher. And if you really enjoyed this and are using the patcher, there's now a way that you can give back to the project. The donations that now can go through the Open Collective, and they go directly to the developers, so they can get the hardware that they need to be able to test over 73 different models of Mac hardware to be able to make sure that the patcher runs properly. And this goes a long way of helping the patcher and being able to help the developers get that hardware they need to test all these different scenarios. So if you want to be able to give back, I'll put a link in the description for that. And with that said, I hope this install worked for you. And if it did, let me know in the comments. What kind of Mac did you use to install OpenCore Legacy Patcher? How well is it working for you? Did the install work okay? Let me know. I hope you enjoyed this video. We'll catch you in the next one. Thanks.